What's cracking, audio fans? It's David here from Prime Audio Reviews, and in this video I'm looking at the FiiO FD3. Let's get it. So here is the box for the FiiO FD3. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but it's got this funky sort of lighting effect where the colors change as you change the angle, the viewing angle. It's pretty cool, but I'll show you what you get inside because it's a pretty nice package. The FD3 here is a $100 IEM. It's $99 basically. It's a single driver, single dynamic driver. I think it's 12 point something millimeters in size, and it is a diamond light carbon or DLC diaphragm driver. But let's have a look inside the case. First of all, you get this nice case. We've seen this with several other FiiO IEMs in the past, and that's really handy. It's a good quality little storage case. Inside, first of all, you probably noticed something right here already, and those are what FiiO calls sound tubes. I would personally call them nozzle filters or tuning filters, but it's the same thing. But I'll get to those soon. You get two sets of tuning filters, a red one and a black one. You get 3 pairs of silicone vocal ear tips, 2 pairs of silicone, 2 pairs of foam, balanced ear tips, and finally you get 3 pairs of silicone base ear tips. And you get this MMCX removal tool which helps you detach the MMCX cable from your earphones if you're having trouble, because MMCX connectors can be a real pain in the bitch sometimes. And anyway, so yeah, pretty decent bundle overall. But let's have a look at the earphones now, and here they are. I'm gonna have a look at the shell first. So here's the FD3 shell. I've got to say it's quite lovely, quite premium looking shell. It's got this kind of celluloid material on the faceplate with a 2.5D glass cover. So it looks pretty sweet, pretty slick. Here's your MMCX connector, color coded, love to see that. On the back of this tube is something interesting. It is a little vent, and that's because the FD3 is a semi-open vent design. There's also a regular vent down near the base of the nozzle. And these nozzles are kind of special. I alluded to these before. These are the tuning filters, or the sound tubes as FiiO calls them. And they can be very, very difficult to remove. If you tighten them up too much, they're really difficult to get off. That is the red tuning filter, and I'll quickly run through the difference between the red and the black. The red is just a little bit more smoother. It's a little bit more linear or flatter in its presentation. And the black filter adds a little bit of upper mid-range and treble energy. So from about 2 kilohertz to 10 kilohertz, somewhere around that range, it adds like 3 decibels or 3 dB extra emphasis there. It gives the sound a livelier, lighter, bit more trebly, wider, more open sound. But it sounds great with either filter attached. I'm just going to put this back on here. Right, let's have a quick look at this cable now, and it is a good quality cable. It is a monocrystalline copper cable, and it feels nice and durable, feels pretty premium, but it is a little bit, in terms of handling, not that great. You can see it's kind of got a bit of memory to it, could be a little bit more supple, although it's very strong and the actual wires inside are good quality. The handling of the cable isn't great. It does have a little bit of microphonics or cable noise as well, but it is what it is. I guess that's why there is also an FD3 Pro version, which basically the only difference, the earphones are exactly the same. The only difference is with the Pro version, you get a better cable. You get FiiO's modular cable system that lets you change out the termination for 3.5mm single-ended, 2.5mm balanced, or 4.4mm balanced. And for that extra cable, you're paying about 30 bucks more, I think. So let's move that, and we'll get right onto the sound of the FiiO FD3. And yeah, I was a bit surprised. I wasn't quite expecting it. The sound, it is what I would call fairly balanced. Having said that though, it's definitely not a neutral IEM or a neutral sound signature. You do have a bit of a boosted bass. The mids are maybe slightly recessed, but vocals are actually quite forward, and the treble on the FD3 is pretty lively in it and forward as well. Now, in case someone is thinking about asking for comparisons with the FD5, I haven't heard that, and I haven't heard the FD1 either. So this is kind of a FD series standalone review, seeing that I haven't heard the other ones, but we'll do our best. So yeah, pretty lively sound. Although it is balanced, it's still pretty lively and upfront. And let's start with the bass real quick, and the bass is pretty punchy. It's an impactful bass. It's got good punch, it's got good impact and slam, but in terms of quantity, it isn't a big bass. It's slightly more emphasized on the mid bass region rather than the sub bass. And what that means is bass guitars and kick drums, etc., will be a bit more prominent, but really low synth basses or 808 bass drums and things like that are not as forward as the mid bass. But it's a good quality bass overall. It's fairly quick, it is fairly well defined and has nice texture. But the good thing about it, although it is somewhat boosted, it doesn't interfere with the mid-range at all. It's a very friendly bass in terms of that. It sort of doesn't dominate the scene, but it plays along nicely with everything else. Moving on to the mid-range now, and the mid-range is fairly full-bodied. It's not a big, thick mid-range. Note size is fairly natural, note density is natural, but vocals are nice and forward. The clarity of the mid-range is very good. Vocals are quite articulate. They're not the most detailed out there, but for something in this price range, definitely no complaints about vocals or the mid-range in general. The tone is fairly accurate, and it's a surprisingly good mid-range overall. Now, changing from the red filter to the black filter, what happens if you do that? You'll get more detail and clarity and a sort of a more open, spacious sound. So let's talk about the treble finally. And although I don't particularly like bright IEMs in general, the FD3 is a little bit bright, but what I love about the treble is the timbre of it. It has a really nice, fairly accurate timbre. One of the best trebles probably I've heard around that $100 price point. It is fairly upfront and it is energetic. So if you are averse to treble, if you find yourself getting fatigued by brighter IEMs, you might not like this one, but it does have that meaty bass to sort of counterbalance that brighter top end, high end. But if you are averse to treble in general, you're probably not going to like the sound of this one. It's a little bit on the bright side in terms of overall tonality. So that is the FiiO FD3. Let's do a couple of quick comparisons now. First, we'll start off with the Moondrop Aria, because it's one of the best sub $100 IEMs. It's also a single dynamic driver earphone. And the main difference with the Aria here is that it has a less forward bass and sub bass, and to a lesser extent not as full in the lower mid-range as well. And what that does, it gives the Aria a lighter feel, a more spacious kind of sound. It does have a fairly good bass response, but it's even further away from a bass head sound than the FD3 is. But for most people, the bass would be ample on this. But yeah, it's just a little bit more leaner in the low frequencies, and that gives it a more spacious, open sound in comparison. It's a little bit less energetic in the treble than the FD3, so it's kind of not as much of a dynamic sound. It's a little bit more sort of linear, smoother overall, but not as dynamic, maybe not as exciting, but it's definitely a smoother listen. Really, I would say for those who want more treble energy, the FiiO FD3 is the way to go. For something that's a little bit more cruisy and laid back with a lighter, open feel, the Aria is the choice for you. And when I say open and spacious, I don't mean it has a bigger soundstage than the FD3. The FD3's actually got a nice large soundstage, nice width and depth, fairly rounded in shape. But in general, the sound is just more forward and up front, whereas the Aria is sort of pulled back and just not as up close. And now for the FiiO FH3. This is a triple driver unit, 1 dynamic driver, 2 balanced armature drivers. It's a little bit more expensive than the FD3. This one comes in at about 129, I think, compared to 99 for the standard FD3. And the differences here are the FH3 has more bass presence, particularly in the sub bass. So if you're into those sub bass notes, the FH3 is likely to please you more. In the mid-range, the FH3 is also more forward, but I guess because it's got a balanced armature taking care of most of the mid-range, the transients are a bit faster in the mids and the note size is a little bit leaner, there's a little bit better definition in there. So it actually has a superior resolution over the FD3. And in terms of treble, the FH3 here, although it has similar levels on the graph of treble, the perceived level is a little bit lower because it's got more that extra fullness in the mid-range that kind of acts to lessen the impact of the treble. So overall, I find the FH3 a smoother listen. So that wraps it up. That is the FiiO FD3. Don't forget there is a link to the full written review in the description below, as well as my affiliate links. Go play with them to help out the channel. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, Parfam audiophile style. And if you are new here and you want to see more reviews like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And until next time, I'll see you later.